Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, in London, England, as well as Paris, France, of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe, but there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south, in the land of the free and the home on the brave, on a beautiful November the 27th, 2019. Grondo Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Oh, Charlton, we're getting ready for a little gluttony down here. All those turkeys that didn't get away on that crossing the street sign and didn't get pardoned, they're all soaking in the brine, getting ready for a little stuffing in the morning.
Yeah, they like them even deep fried in California. It's not fair what the turkeys, we do appreciate their sacrifice for our gluttony. Big C is all fair and love and war. I want to say there's so much going on in the sports universe, and it's cold. It's actually cold in California. It's about 60 degrees. I'm not used to that kind of cold, Big C, but we know we have a lot of football going on all over the sports world, and of course basketball, some NHL also. We know it takes backseat, but we'll mention some schedules anyway. I want to say Big C Sports brought to you by Google and Alexa. You can just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I will say, Big C, what are your thoughts on football? Because football's all over the place, and you'll hear that on Big C Sports. Also, launching on Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. You can follow us on Xfinity, Comcast as we speak. Big C, I know the holidays is for people to enjoy life, enjoy family and friends, and those who can't be with family, there's always a phone call you can make. But those who are fighting for our country, they can't make any phone calls. They're in bunkers. They're doing whatever they got to do to keep this country safe, Big C. And then there's some veterans who come back home, and people forgot about their service. But we do want to give out our National Suicide Hotline for military veterans and civilians at 800-273-8255, 800-273-8255, or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. Big C, why is that so important to you?
Charlton, first and foremost, I wanted to say thanks to those tens of thousands of servicemen and servicewomen who are deployed on this great holiday of Thanksgiving that are coming up, that are around the world, that are sacrificed from being away from their families for the sovereignty of our country, Charlton. And hopefully they have a great feast on Thanksgiving, Charlton, and keep their thoughts and prayers with everybody here in America.
Yeah.
But also for those servicemen and women who have come back to America, Charlton, who have, felt downtrodden and left out. And so many veterans have succumbed to this horrific disease called suicide, Charlton. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline number is there to hopefully stem the tide of that, for these people to have someone to talk to show that they're not the forgotten heroes of America, that they're thought about on a daily basis, which everybody needs to extend that warm welcome and greeting to our former and current service members, Charlton, because we don't know what plight mentally or physically that they're going through when they come back from the battles of being in foreign wars, Charlton. But to have our country to not be able to stand behind these veterans every day, as you've mentioned, you've seen many of them that are homeless on the streets of Northern California, out there in that area, Charlton, and it's a nationwide epidemic. They all need some comfort in their lives, not just a warm meal in their belly, but they need some comfort of mind, Charlton, knowing that people care about them and that they have someone to talk to, and the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number is one of those outlets for them, Charlton.
800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255, or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. I know every day feels like Veterans Day for a lot of people when we have Veterans Day. But I want to say Big C Sports is probably the only sports show in the universe that honors and pays homage to our veterans all the time. And I just think it'd be nice if other people join that too. Just my opinion. I want to just say there's a lot going on in sports. I know NFL carries the banner when it comes to professional sports. We know that sports is a billion-dollar industry, and boys and girls sports is the foundation to that billion-dollar industry. But I want to say on this happy Thanksgiving, Big C, I want to ask you, before we get into some talk of NFL, I want to ask you, what is Big C cooking up I know it might have some wings to it, Big C, even though they may be, wings that have been peeled off already, the feathers. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I had this gorgeous orange duck that I, have ready to go into the roaster tomorrow, Charlton. It's going to be a part of a gluttony, a feast that I'm going to have here at my humble abode here in the South, Charlton, thinking about all of those who have sacrificed for this great country, and even all of those who don't have that meal that, we all have a chance to enjoy on this great Thanksgiving that's coming up tomorrow, Charlton.
Yeah.
But, even as I sit around with family and friends and, enjoy a wonderful dinner and some great afternoon entertainment, Charlton, I'll always think about our veterans and those homeless people that are out there, because the day after Thanksgiving, I will be out passing out meals.
Yeah, I just appreciate that. I always want to just say thank you to everybody who makes our country a better place. And I know that when I think about Thanksgiving, I don't normally cook. I usually maybe bring a pie or something, but I love the dressing that I get to have. Mama's dressing to me is better than anybody's dressing in the universe. Of course, you got that Yardbird. A lot of people like to do the Yardbird. And in California, I'm sure it's happened all over the place. Have you ever tasted some deep fried turkey? It may not be the healthiest thing, but Big C, man, it tastes good. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you deep fry any type of poultry, Charlton, to me it all comes out to be kind of the same. I mean, whether you're frying chicken, whether you're frying turkey, whether you're frying duck, it all has the similarities of each other when you're looking at fowl in that capacity.
Yeah, it's always good. And Mama's lemon meringue pie, the pecan pie, and even peach cobbler. There's a lot of things, but nothing really tops the collard greens that I like to have on my turkey also. I want to ask you, it's a stupid question, it's a funny question, but sometimes when you interact with different families for holidays and people ask you, do you want the dark meat or do you want the white meat, Big C? I want it all. Why do they make us choose what color meat, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, I've always been partial to the dark meat on the turkey. It's more juicy and succulent.
Yeah.
I mean, the breast is fine when you first cut it, but after that it tends to dry out, and I like the moisture in my meat.
Yeah, I love the same thing, Big C. They say the darker the meat, the sweeter the juice, and it actually I think it does ring true. And speaking of meat, we have NFL football. Everybody is talking about who's the best team, who's the best players, and we know it's all great. I just love this time of year. I know I'm going to be traveling for Thanksgiving. I just love to say happy Thanksgiving to everybody who loves to celebrate that, and hopefully families can get across the country. They were saying that so many power outages. I think Oakland International Airport had a power outage, and so they had some flights delayed, and then they got the power back on. There are a lot of airplanes on the East Coast. I know a lot of people are trying to get to their families. And then of Southern California, if you've flown out of LAX, they were showing on the news this morning, look at the traffic going to LAX. Big C, it's always that way, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, traffic is something that we've become accustomed to, but also this time of the year, Charlton, is the inclement weather that you get up in the Midwest and up in the Northeast. There's been quite a bit of snow and hampered a lot of seasonal travelers, Charlton, with delays and flights being canceled out of the Northeast and the Midwest, Charlton. This is something that we always deal with this time of the year.
Yeah.
People being delayed in getting back to their loved ones.
Yeah, and I know there are people who even travel internationally, so hopefully you get to the airport. I think they usually say get there 2 hours before your flight. You may want to try to plan on getting there 4 hours because you're stuck in traffic and just a lot more people traveling. Also, if you're out traveling, they've closed a couple of highways, Northern California going up over to Nevada. Interstate 80 runs from San Francisco all the way to New York City. So please be wary if you're traveling over the mountains that you're out there being safe, and carry chains and also carry some food. One time I was coming from Nevada and it took me 12 hours because the snow was so bad. And even though you had chains, when they close a highway, you're stuck there anyway. You got to take some extra food, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, it's always proper to be prepared when you're traveling, Charlton. You never know what's going to occur when you're on the roadways of America. You don't always concern yourself about your driving, but the driving around you and the elements.
Yeah, that's always true. So I want to get into just saying, everyone, please be safe out there and have lots of fun as you're out there traveling around to go see family and friends on this beautiful Thanksgiving holiday. Big C. So, Big C, obviously, with the weather out there, sometimes we may have a little bit of technical difficulties, but we'll get through that too. I want to just get into Big C's teams and NFL there's a lot of talk about NFL. It really is. Like, the playoffs have already started, it seems. It's like every week we have a game that could be a playoff game, or teams that are going to be in the playoffs that are actually playing each other. I want to get into NFL teams that could be eliminated from playoff contention. Big C is coming up on week 13, and I want to give out some names and just give me your thoughts on those teams. The Detroit Lions, we know they're playing on Thanksgiving, but this is a team that's must-see football on Thanksgiving, but they just have not learned to get it together over the past couple of years. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, they started a new regime last year. They brought in Matt Patricia from the New England Patriots, who had been their defensive coordinator through several Super Bowl runs, Charlton, and thinking that he could implement that style of defense and offense in Detroit. One of the things about when a coach gets a job with a new team, Charlton, he's not bringing along the personnel that he was coaching with the previous team.
Yeah.
Detroit was pretty, stayed pat with the players that they have. They've lost their starting quarterback, Matthew Stafford. They've only won 3 games on the season, Charlton, and one more loss, and they can get ready for Christmas.
Yeah, and I know they don't want to lose, but just give me a feeling. They built at one time, I know everybody's wanted to have a new stadium, but from Pontiac Superdome, remember the Superdome actually? And they actually had the inflated roof, and they could actually conform it so it could have basketball on the inside as well as football. And they were not able to get to the Super Bowl then. I know everyone's told we need a new facility in order to be competitive. So they tore that down, and now they have a new dome stadium that's, I think, Ford Field, and they still have not been able to make it to the Super Bowl. So I don't know what the issue is in Detroit, but this is an old-time program. Why have they not had the success? They play inside, Big C. You would think they would have some success. Your thoughts?
Well, both of those stadiums, Charlton, have hosted a Super Bowl when they were in Pontiac Superdome. The San Francisco 49ers played the Cincinnati Bengals. We've also seen the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Seattle Seahawks in the Ford Stadium there in downtown Detroit, Charlton. This is one of the heritage programs in the NFL, and also one of the 5 NFL teams that have never been to a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I don't.
You wonder what would it take? Every team in that division has been to a Super Bowl, except for the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, that's very well said. I thought Caldwell gave them some hope, but they got rid of him and went right back to what they used to be. The Atlanta Falcons, when you go down south, now I think this team, I believe they used to play in Fulton County Stadium, and then they built the Georgia Dome, and now they play Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So they've had 3 beautiful football stadiums over the last 35, 40 years, Big C, and they have managed to go to a couple of Super Bowls. Atlanta's a great city. They have so much to do down south in Atlanta. It's the busiest international airport, I believe, in the world, if not at least the United States of America. But they have also fallen a little bit short, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, this has been a very disappointing season for the Atlanta Falcons, a season that started with so much hope and promise. You had Matt Ryan coming back off a banner year, the same type of year he had when he had his MVP season, and they went to the Super Bowl. Julio Jones, the highest paid receiver in the NFL, seems uncoverable, but they just can't get him the ball.
Yeah.
And their defense has just been something, of a mystery all year long. They have not been able to get to the opposing quarterbacks. They were halfway through the season before they amassed 10 sacks, Joe.
Yeah, and that's a team. It's a city that deserves a champion. I think baseball is still the one that carries the banner for the city of Atlanta. They've always found a way to be competitive in the playoffs and even in World Series over the last couple of decades. And then we go to New York City. I've always heard if you can make it in New York City, you can make it anywhere. From Wall Street to people sleeping on the street, Big C. We know they have the most beautiful skyline, at least you would think, on the East Coast, right there on the Atlantic Ocean and the Hudson River. But when you think about the New York Giants and the New York Jets, these are 2 teams outside of the Giants over a couple of years ago when they've been to the Super Bowl. I think they've had their share, but the Jets have only been one time. So the Giants really are the team of New York, even though they're in New Jersey and the Meadowlands. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, as you look at the Giants, this is an organization that held on to memories too long. And the NFL is like, what have you done for me lately? If it's been several years since you've been to a Super Bowl, you need to try to start changing the regime. The Giants felt that if they go through 3 different coaches, it would make a difference in the organization, even though you had not had a wholesale change of personnel, especially at the quarterback position. And that has hampered this organization's growth. And they have struggled going through 3 coaches and no quarterback change up until this year, and Daniel Jones may not be the answer.
Yeah, what I do like about New York, imagine this. they've managed to have two football teams that play in the same stadium. We know Buffalo's in upstate New York, but the Jets and the Giants, they've managed to play in the same stadium, and none of them are in New York because he is over in the Meadowlands in New Jersey. But the Yankees and the Mets, they've managed to have their own digs. So the Giants and the Jets, at some point in time, you would think every other year one would be a strong contender for the playoffs. Also, teams that may be facing elimination. Washington, D.C. is a beautiful area. I mean, there's so much history in our nation's capital. Back over the 80s, it was almost like every other year the Redskins would be relevant. If not a Super Bowl contender, at least a playoff contender. It's been many moons, Big C, and a lot of regime changes under Coach Snyder. Your thoughts?
Well, one of the things with the Redskins that I look at is there's something they have in common with New York, and that's New York Knicks. James Dolan owns the New York Knicks.
Yeah.
And everyone knows as long as he owns that team is not going to go anywhere.
Yep.
Same as we have in Washington, D.C. with Daniel Snyder owning the Redskins. This team has fallen to the abyss under Daniel Snyder's ownership. As we think about how that team was such a dominant NFL franchise in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and even early 2000s, Daniel Snyder has now ran this team out of Washington, D.C., out to Virginia,
Yep.
and also all the illustrious history of the program.
Yeah, there was something about the old RFK Stadium when they would get rocking, Big C, it would bounce up and down because it was built that way. And that same atmosphere is no longer there. I've noticed the same thing in San Francisco. As lively as Levi Stadium has been lately, there was nothing like Candlestick Park. It is a newer stadium, but the atmosphere doesn't come with it. Even Golden One Center is not. If you look at the Chase Center in San Francisco, it's not the same energy that you had at Oracle Arena in Oakland, but it all takes time. Big C, down in the desert, Arizona Cardinals, I know they got the number one pick in Kyler Murray. This is a team that I do believe this franchise is on the upswing. They may have to get there without Larry Fitzgerald, but Murray's going to really spark them. Give me your thoughts on the Cardinals. Already maybe played themselves out of playoff contention, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, this is a team that's, as you could say, both ways, two sides of the coin. They're ahead of the curve and they're behind the curve.
Yeah.
They're ahead of the curve with their quarterback, Kyler Murray. This young man is going to be an exciting player, I believe, for years to come in the NFL. They're behind the curve on the development of the offense and defensive line. They're going to have to make some improvements with their offense and defensive line, Charlton, to get this team up to status with Kyler Murray.
Yeah, they're going to have to do it. And they will. They have a beautiful facility. They have all the money they need down there, and they're getting support in Arizona. Just a matter of time, in my opinion. But the NFC West is a very tough conference. Also, if we go down to the South, you have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and this is a team that's had the up and down. They've been to the top of the mountain, also at the bottom of the mountain. Back in the days when they won a Super Bowl, and I think Gruden was the coach with Tony Dungy's players. They've been up and down, but this is a team that had a lot of promise coming into the season, and they also are on the verge of playing themselves out of playoff contention. Victor, your thoughts?
Well, there was a lot of hopeful thoughts in Tampa Bay with Bruce Arians' arrival and thinking that he would be the quarterback whisperer, that he could get Jameis Winston to change his ways. But, Tampa Bay has been a team of dysfunctionality, not just offensively, but defensively also. They've had to cut two starting players throughout the season. That lets you know that this organization is in a little bit of disarray. Jameis Winston has been a turnover machine all year long, Charlton, even though they have two of the best wide receivers in pro football.
Yeah, I thought if they could have just fixed their quarterback situation and right there in contention for a playoff spot. Also, if you stay south, people think let's go to Florida. It's a great place. The tax, I don't think they have taxes there, and state taxes in Florida. The weather is always either a hurricane or sunshine. It's like it's either or, it seems, Big C. But there was a time back in the day with the Miami Dolphins, the NFL's only undefeated team from start to finish. That was a place where you just went there for great football. The college programs are amazing. The high school programs are among the best in the country. When you go to their pro football teams lately, the Dolphins and the Buccaneers, nothing to write home. They may be out of the playoffs also. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the Dolphins are long gone. There was a lot of people talking about they were tanking for the season, but they've coming up and won a couple games, Charlton. You got to think about players. Players are proud players in the NFL. They don't go out there to lose regardless of speculation of an upcoming season or draft, Charlton. They're looking for employment now and in the future.
Yeah, they're always looking for you're just one play away from somebody taking your job, especially in that league. And now a team that no one thought would ever be big. Just John Elway, not blaming him, but that's a program that's always been a contender. With different head coaches, different quarterbacks. Their players have always gone to Mile High, and they knew they had home field advantage because of the altitude, Big C, but not this year. Your thoughts?
Well, when you look at the regime in Denver under John Elway, Charlton, this organization hasn't been that strong in the NFL. You know, they had one playoff year with Tim Tebow where they won a wild card game. They had a couple years with Peyton Manning. But those were years when Peyton Manning had players who wanted to play with him because of his legacy in the NFL.
Yeah.
They have no Peyton Manning at quarterback anymore, so they don't have this hot shot in the pocket. So it's hard to get the free agents to come to Denver. And if you look over the past couple of years, they just haven't wanted to go there.
Yeah, and I don't know why. When you talk about franchises that have been so strong and so solid, and I would think that Denver would be one of those franchises. It's just a matter of time, I think, before they get on top. But if you're counting on Elway to do it, I think he's had 7 different quarterbacks since he came there and took over as a GM, and they haven't had success outside of Manning leaving, Big C. I want to get on just your thoughts on 6 upcoming NFL free agents who haven't helped their future or their paydays this season. Again, given the opportunity, and you can't always blame one person, but then sometimes you can, Big C. Jameis Winston, we talk about him, quarterback for Tampa Bay. He's only 59.9% completions. He has 3,391 yards, 22 touchdowns. That's not bad, but he has 20 interceptions. He's almost going touchdown and interception back-to-back. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, there's a lot of 20s in Jameis Winston's numbers. He's also making $20 million because the Bucs picked up the 5th-year option on his contract, thinking that he would turn things around. Statistically, other than interceptions, he's having an outstanding year, Charlton. But Jameis Winston, with the interceptions, you cannot win in NFL consistency. And you think about it, he's going to lead the NFL in interceptions this year in his 5th year in the league.
Yeah, and you talked about a lot of 20s in his contract. We're at the 22-minute part of our show, Big C, so sometimes the universe lines things up. Also, when we talk about 6 players that maybe have hurt their chance going forward, making more money, even staying with the same team. I remember Marcus Mariota when he played against Jameis Winston when Oregon played Florida State in the Rose Bowl. They were playing as part of this 14, BCS competing for a college football championship. Well, quarterback in the Tennessee Titans, he's only completing 59.1% of his passes. He has 1,179 yards, almost just a third of what Winston has. 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I know he's been banged up at times, Big C, but this is not what they thought they were going to get out of Mariota, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I think he's been more banged up mentally than physically. When you think about Marcus Mariota, he was drafted second behind Jameis Winston in that same draft. He has been benched by the Tennessee Titans. He was benched for a quarterback that was cut by the Miami Dolphins. Ryan Tannehill has come in and made this offense very proficient since he's taken over at quarterback for the Tennessee Titans. He's had the willingness to run where Mariota did not want to do that. It's going to cost Mariota a lot of money in the upcoming years. Matter of fact, I don't even think he'll be a Tennessee Titan next year.
Well, there are times when players try to play injured, and sometimes they play like they are injured. Can't really tell with them all the time. I want to come out to the West Coast, and I know that there's going to be some changes going into that new stadium in Southern California, Inglewood, where there's quarterback or running back, I don't know, but Melvin Gordon, I remember, he was solid last year. He's still a good running back, and I know he tried to hold out and strong arm the team, but the team said, look, we're billionaires, you're not, so they can hold out. Well, Melvin Gordon, running back for the Chargers, in 100 attempts, he has 369 yards and just about 4 touchdowns, Big C, 1 fumble. I thought that a lot like Ezekiel Elliott down in Dallas. I thought he was a very solid running back. But the Chargers are just falling on hard times. This is a team that was in the playoffs last year with a 12-4 record, I believe. But this year, you think Melvin Gordon actually hurt himself and the team, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, as you look at him, he's averaging less than 4 yards a carry. That's very under pedestrian in the NFL. That's not going to get you any productivity in an offense. And Melvin Gordon didn't do himself any good by holding out throughout the preseason and the first 4 games of the regular season, Charlton. He came in. He was behind the momentum of the offense, Charlton. The players had already played beyond him, but he came in and accepted him nevertheless because he was a veteran with the organization. but the productivity just hasn't been there this year.
Yeah, and they say running backs get banged up a lot, and that may be part of it too. But the timing's not there in that offense, hasn't been all season. I think their quarterback doesn't help all either, Big C. On the defensive side of the ball, we go back to the city of New York, the New York Giants. Think about this. Leonard Williams, defensive end, New York Giants. That's Lawrence Taylor territory, so people are always compared. They had Carson. What a great linebacking team they had back in the day. But this gentleman, 27 tackles, no sacks, no tackles for loss. But he's like their offense. They're just not winning. It's amazing how such a great franchise can be so bad. Nick, your thoughts?
Well, he was traded across the locker rooms right at the trade deadline in New York. He was sent from the Jets to the Giants because the Jets said he had no pass rushing ability.
Yeah.
His statistics prove that out, Charlton. You're 12 games into the NFL season. You have 0 sacks as a defensive lineman. That's not non-productivity. Plus, you have no tackles for loss. That means you cannot get beyond the line of scrimmage into the opposing backfield.
Yep.
This may be his last run in the city of New York.
Well, as we stick to the East Coast, and I know Carson Wentz, they put some green on his pocket, just like the jerseys, Big C. But Nelson Aguilar, wide receiver, Philadelphia Eagles, 36 receptions, 322 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a fumble. But I'm not just going to blame him. I mean, if you're catching balls and dropping them, that's one thing. But with Carson Wentz, he's been throwing a lot behind his receivers. I think sometimes leading his receivers too much. And guys don't want to sell out when it may cost them broken ribs or whatever it is. So I'm not going to put all the blame on him, but they may put the blame on him, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, this is a guy that's been targeted 63 times this year. He's only had 36 receptions out of that. And if you go back to the opening game of the season, Charlton, against the Atlanta Falcons, he dropped 2 potential touchdowns in the end zone that would have gave the Eagles that victory. And if you go back to this last game against the Seattle Seahawks that they played, he also dropped one in the end zone there. Both very catchable situations, Charlton. And that lets you know that a receiver may not be wanting to be with an organization much longer.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't have a choice, but someone will pick him up. He still has a talent, Big C. I also, as we talk about 6 upcoming NFL free agents who have not helped their future or payday, at least with this work this season, Vic Beasley, defensive end, Atlanta Falcons, only has 26 tackles, 4 sacks, and then 4 tackles for loss. Whenever you think Atlanta Falcons, you're always going to think Matt Ryan just because he's got the $155 million. Arthur Blank put a lot of money in his pocket, and he can put money in anybody's pocket that he wants to. But on the defensive side, they're also a liability at times. Beasley has to do better than 4 sacks, and we're coming up on week 13, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, this is the 30th ranked defense in the NFL when you look at the Atlanta Falcons. Just a couple of years ago when the Falcons were in the Super Bowl, Vic Beasley led the NFL with 15 sacks. The Atlanta Falcons picked up this 5th-year option on his contract this year, Charlton, and it was at the dismay of a lot of people in the media, and it's proven out because here it is, you're 12 games into the season, you have 4 sacks, Charlton. Vic Beasley needs to be a double-sack individual. I don't think he'll be an Atlanta Falcon after this season.
What is it with Atlanta also? They have a great baseball dynasty, I would say, in the Braves. They have they have everything you would think they would need in their NBA franchise with the Hawks. I know the soccer league has caught on, and the USL, they've caught on. They've had a lot of sellouts and a lot of fan interest for the South. But football's really big in the state of Georgia and in most of the South. But what do you think it would take for... I mean, the Falcons are a lot like Detroit, but Detroit has not been to 2 Super Bowls in the last 30 years, and the Falcons have. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the thing is, you have to win. I don't care where you are in the NFL. You just have to win. That's something that the Falcons haven't done consistently. A lot of people want to put the blame on head coach Dan Quinn, but he's not the one, throwing interceptions. He's not the one throwing incompletions. He's not the one missing tackles, and he's not the one not getting sacks. It comes down to player production on the field. You also got to look at your GM when you get into those situations also, Charlton. It's not just the head coach. The GM is making personnel decisions on players who fit the roster, salary cap-wise, and that's what it comes down to. You can't put that much money into 5 different positions and expect to have enough money to pay everybody else. When you look at Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Jake Matthews, Vic Beasley, these players and Grady Jarrett, they're making a copious amount of money against the salary cap. it doesn't leave that much to go around to the rest of the players.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, but everybody's making a lot of money, but you still got to produce, or maybe you don't got to produce but still get the money. We're going to come up with what's called a Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. We're going to take the pause and come back and talk a lot more football, and when we come back, we're going to hope that you stay with us and love what we talk about in the second half. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, we are back from the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause, and you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the world, all around the world on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker.com. The apps that I really love are called Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear Welcome to the Show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. You can also follow Big C Sports on Xfinity Comcast Television, launching on Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Big C. I know Thanksgiving is great for gluttony. It's great for all the turkeys that sacrifice for our gluttony. Big C. It's good for families getting together, our friends. And if you're a loner, you just want to do it alone, nothing wrong with that too. You can also watch football. Some games that we'll be watching on Thursday, as the NFL loves having football on Thursday. Chicago at Detroit. Matt Nagy was a playoff coach at 12-4 last year. His team is 5-6 this year. Matt Patricia, not much different, continues to struggle in Detroit. 3 wins, 7 losses, and 1 tie. Big C, your thoughts on this Thanksgiving game?
Well, so much was thought about the Chicago Bears coming into the season after having a promising year and having to exit the playoffs last year with a missed field goal attempt, Charlton. But this offense has struggled all year long. They got rid of the best running back, Gordon Howard, ended up shipping him off to Philadelphia, and they were struggling without a running game most of the year.
Yep.
Armstrong had an outstanding game last week at running back, Charlton, for the Bears, and they got a victory after having a couple game slump. Trubisky threw a couple touchdown passes. They need more consistency out of the quarterback position. Take that back, not Armstrong, David Montgomery.
Yeah.
But Trubisky has to be more efficient at quarterback. When you look on the Detroit on the flip side, Charlton, Matthew Stafford most likely is out for the rest of the year. Driscoll got banged up, their backup quarterback. They may be down to their third-string quarterback, an undrafted rookie free agent, Charlton, in this game going against the Bears. And if that's the case, this Bears defense will come alive and eat some lion instead of turkey on Thanksgiving.
Eating lion, I don't know if that's legal in the United States, but I'm sure that may have been a faux pas, Big C, but I understand it tastes pretty good. Buffalo at 8-3. They visit the Dallas Cowboys at 6-5. You would think the Cowboys would be the team that's 8-3 and the Bills at 6-5, but I still think the Cowboys are a better team. But we'll see. They've had a hard time beating teams with a winning record. You have a coach and ownership not really talking on the same terms, it seems. One guy's a billionaire, the other guy's not. Sometimes that changes the shift of power, Big C. So the Cowboys 6-5. Jason Garrett has been on the hot seat all year long. I don't know how you're in the hot seat when owners paying you $5 million a year, Big C. But if he suffers back-to-back losses against the AFC East, I think Jerry Jones will be the one on the sideline next week, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, this is one of those games that I kind of favor the Buffalo Bills in, Charlton. That 8-3 record means something. And they have an outstanding defense, what the Dallas Cowboys have struggled with this year. You saw the pressure that New England put on that Dallas offense. You're going to get that same type of pressure from this Buffalo defense, Charlton, that New England put on that Dallas offense. And I think about Cole Beasley coming back to Dallas after Dallas said he was no longer needed for his services. This is a great opportunity for him to come back and shine once again in Texas Stadium in front of Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys, Charlton. I like the Buffalo Bills getting a victory in Dallas on Turkey Day.
Let me just get your thoughts on something, because Jerry Jones has said, look, it's my money. I'll do what I want to do with it. I can fire who I want to fire and hire who I want to hire, and everybody knows that. And Jerry Jones, he's not getting younger, but nobody is getting any younger. But even if you're Garrett and you win, it's like every week you don't have someone who really believes in you. You can't say that because he's giving them $5 to $6 million a year. That's a lot of belief. Even if you don't like somebody, $5 million makes up for them not being liked, Big C. But I think Garrett is in a good position here because he's not just waiting to be fired. He probably has his resume out there to other people saying, look, we won our division the last couple of years, Big C, even if they let him go. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, no coach wants to be fired from any position, Charlton, regardless of the level of football that he's coaching. Well, when you look at Jason Garrett, it's not all Jason Garrett, Charlton. As much as given as much as desired also, the Dallas defense just has not lived up to expectations. As much as they want to say about the offense not being productive, the defense has not been there. They've had a copious amount of injuries on the offensive line throughout the year. There's been times when they've been without both of their offensive tackles in the same game. The running game hasn't been as solid as it has before.
Right.
The receivers haven't been consistent. I think the one Achilles heel with the Dallas Cowboys is at their tight end position.
Yeah.
Because Jerry Jones loves to love guys that he's had in the organization. He brought Jason Witten back into the organization.
Yeah, he's not good
He's
anymore.
stymied part of the productivity of the offense. You got a tight end that does not put a threat on the defense. Anybody can catch a 5-yard pass.
Yeah.
But you have a tight end that does not threaten any defense in the NFL, so it allows the safety to play closer to the line of scrimmage and help shut down the run of Ezekiel Elliott.
And when you say anyone can catch a 5-yard pass, he even dropped one of those in New England, Big C. He's a liability. He can't get open downfield. If you're going to have him on the team, have him block standing as quarterback protection, my opinion. Big C, also for the Cowboys, Amari Cooper, Randall Cobb, and Michael Gallup, they all got to shine. It can't just be Ezekiel one week and then hoping that Prescott can find an open receiver. And you know a quarterback needs a good guy in Cooper to show up for him, and I think that's going to happen this week. I want to also go down to the southern part of this country. I know there's a lot of people eating a lot of deep-fried food. This might be the slowest game on Thanksgiving, Big C, my opinion. But I think it's something that everybody wants to see. Just because Atlanta jumped on these good boys before. New Orleans 9-2. They visit the Atlanta Falcons 3-8, Big C. And one of those victories came against New Orleans, and I think it's just a matter of time. Dan Quinn seems to be a man that is also a lot like Jason Garrett. They've been sending out resumes, too. They're just not waiting to be fired. Your thoughts?
No, I mean, Dan Quinn, has been on the hot seat all year long.
Yeah.
Excuse me, down in Atlanta.
Yes.
But, they got 3 victories on the year. One of those victories came against New Orleans 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Would this victory, if they sweep New Orleans during the regular season, would that save his job? I think not.
Well,
he's gone regardless.
Yeah.
New Orleans is coming in. They're a little peeved because of that game they lost down in the Superdome to the Falcons. The Falcons had been on a losing streak. All of a sudden came in and held Drew Brees without a touchdown pass for the first time this season.
Yep.
I think Drew Brees is coming back with a lot of angry and vinegar on Turkey Day down in Atlanta. I know they might not have a turkey in the oven, but they don't mind having a falcon put in the oven, Charlton.
Well, I know I don't know if that's on the endangered species list, but I'm sure you good boys would eat them anyway, Big C. And that's the game. That's the late game for all the Turkey Day football. And it's just a matter of seeing some great football happen. And they're in the same conference. Atlanta really has nothing to play for other than pride and a paycheck. And a lot of those guys have to deal with that, too. So we wish everybody nothing but the best as they have a safe holiday season, watching a lot of NFL football. I want to get your thoughts as we look at the world of college football. And, I've been saying we need 6 playoff teams. You can have the top 2 have a bye week and a play-in game. Or that's just my thoughts. But going into the last week of the regular season of college football, you know what? There are not enough teams to fill the 78 bowl slots. 6 would be short exact, to which is the biggest shortfall going into the final week of the season in the last 4 years. Think about that. Have you ever, everybody says they want to win a bowl game, and you got to have 6 wins to get into a bowl game. Big C, we're short right now of teams getting in, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you talk about expanding the college football playoffs, this is one of the problems that you come up with. There are too many college bowl games being played right now.
Yeah.
But this is also what a lot of kids go to college for, to have an opportunity to play in a bowl game, regardless of the level of the bowl game, to be able to go to the game, to get the swag bags, to go to the press conference, Charlton, to get the new digs that you're going to wear for that game, Charlton.
Yeah.
It's exciting to a lot of players.
Yeah.
But, as you look at 6-6 is the benchmark to qualify for a bowl game.
Yeah.
And potentially right now, if college football was to end right now, you're 5 teams short of having that qualifying number to qualify for bowl games. So you're going to have to change the resume of what it is to get into a bowl game. And here it is, you're going to have teams attending bowl games with a losing record. What type of reward system is that?
Yeah.
And it's hard to change the playoff structure the way that it is in college football, because then you got to eliminate bowl games. And which bowl games do you eliminate to line up these playoff games, Charlton? The whole structure of college football, of what people won conference championships for, is going to be thrown out the door now if you do that.
Yeah, it's happening. You look at teams that are, I mean, would 5 and 7 work? Would people really fly across the country to watch a 5 and 7 bowl game, or even a team that goes 6 and 6? And we see a lot of bowl stadiums are empty. There's always the haves and the have-not. The thing with culling is you take the best crop, and the other stuff you make it fertilizer, or they ship it off to feed the cows or whatever they do with it. The good stuff shows up in our grocery stores. And if you look at the same analogy with college sports, Boston College, great institution for higher learning. Ohio, Nebraska used to be a surefire invitation to college bowl games. They're on the borderline too. Kent State, Mississippi State. These programs used to be almost surefire invitations for bowls. If you look at Boston College and you look at also Mississippi State and then Nebraska, these are the SEC programs, the ACC, and also the Big 12. And they may sneak into a bowl game, but they're having a hard time even contending for, middle of the pack in their own conferences. That's not good for the bowls, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, they would get in there based on APR rating, Charlton, which is the rating system from the NCAA if they're sub-500 teams.
Yeah.
But, like I said, it's both bad for college football. If you want to expand Division I football into a larger playoff spectrum, how would you do that? How would that composite break down? You just spoke about people flying across the country on a last-minute notice to go to another state during the holiday time to attend these playoff games, Charlton. It's not feasible to move 30 to 40,000 people from an opposing city week by week to different cities to say, okay, we want you to attend these games.
Yeah. Well, they do it in the Division II, or what they call the FBS. They have everything but the FBS, SCS, Division I, Division II. They have that.
But when you look at the FBS, the playoff system, none of those stadiums are housing more than 30,000 people.
Yeah, that's
We're
true.
talking about teams that play in front of 100,000 at home games and said, okay, you have to travel. And that FBS thing that's set up, if you watch that on television, a lot of those stadiums may be 50 to 60% full during that time of the year.
Yeah.
That's not a good look for major college football when you're talking about the networks investing billions of dollars into getting the best product and the best teams available and have time to market those games.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. It's all fair in love and war, and it's hard to travel, especially when the weather's so inclement, just to see a bowl game. People having a hard time just traveling for Thanksgiving. And a team that's coming up on, it's almost like Christmas. You can count on it every year. Whether you get a lot of toys or not, Big C, sometimes you get no toys. Sometimes you get hugs and thank yous. Michigan, when you look at Michigan and Ohio State, that's like a Christmas present for the people in the Big Ten Conference. But Michigan's roller coaster season, it meets an inevitable impediment in top-ranked Ohio State. I thought LSU was ranked number 1. Somebody's dipping into the moonshine down south when they keep changing on teams, Big C. LSU hasn't lost, and they drop on the polls already. It doesn't make any sense. I think they only scored 66 points last week, and maybe they should have scored 70. But Ohio State, the Buckeyes, have won 7 straight, and 14 of the last 15 games against the Michigan Wolverines. Think about this. And it's not just Jim Harbaugh. It's Ohio State knocking off Michigan, Big C. Ohio State's only lost 4 conference games over the last 4 years. Michigan's part of that, being chewed up in the process. I don't think Harbaugh's in any trouble if he does what they've done 14 of the last 15 times. Your thoughts?
Well, I think a lot of people in the media and around the country have this misconception about how great the Michigan program was in the past. It never really has been. They had a couple of runs when they had Bo Schembechler back there, but if you look at the last couple of coaches, Rich Rodriguez and Brady Hoke, none of those coaches ever had a double-digit win season, Charlton. And if you think about the history of the Michigan program overall, they've only had 4 11-win seasons in the history of Michigan football. Ohio State has done that in the last 4 years, had 11-win seasons. So as people want to think that this program has, fallen from grace, no. Jim Harbaugh has this program back to where it was in his glory days. He has them competitive, and if you think about it, I believe he's like 42-16 since he's been the head coach at Michigan, which is above the curve of any coach that they've had there.
Yeah.
Ohio State just happens to be the moxie of the Big Ten, Charlton.
Yeah.
It is the flagship program. Urban Meyer came in. He brought that mantra he had down in Florida, kept the winning ways going with the Buckeyes tradition, and just took them new heights. Jim Tressel did the same thing there, as well as Cooper when he was at Ohio State.
Yeah, and one thing that people got to understand, too, you know, Urban Meyer, when he was at Utah, they had some issues at Utah with players. When he went to Florida, they had a lot of players that had issues, even maybe somewhat said at Ohio State, too, but they haven't had any issues under the new regime. So it's not always how Michigan's a bad team or not. They just don't do a lot of shenanigans with some players that have followed some of those last guys. If you think about it, Big C, I mean, they just have different standards, in my opinion. But if you think about football and what matters, coming up on this bowl season in the final week of college football, it's called Rivalry Week. I know USC played UCLA last week. Cal played Stanford last week, and we'll have more teams playing. But you have number 19, Cincinnati. They're playing at number 18, Memphis. And Cincinnati may be in a better state for football up there in Ohio. But Memphis is a good team as well, Big C. Give me your thoughts on the rival between those two schools.
Well, Charlton, this game is a conference rival game as well as it is a game. The winner of this game will get a New Year's Bowl game. You're talking about the highest rank of the non-Power 5 teams, and these are the top two highest ranked of that, Charlton. The winner of this game will get a New Year's Bowl game. That's how big this game is.
Yeah, it's just a matter of these are not the sexy names, but I want to go back to, as we talk about Michigan, now number 1 Ohio State, at number 13 Michigan. When you think about Bo Schembechler, you think about Woody Hayes and all the All-Americans that played on these programs, whether it's Desmond Howard that played for the University of Michigan. And then I think about, you know, Archie Griffin that won back-to-back Heisman trophies playing for Ohio State. It goes way back. It wasn't about who won the game per se, more so about the players and those coaches. Even Woody Hayes is still synonymous with Ohio State football, and Bo Schembechler is synonymous with the Michigan Wolverines. But they've had many different coaches since those two guys have gone on. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the greatest coach ever in Ohio State history, and people don't even realize it, is Paul Brown. Paul Brown is the only coach to win a high school national championship, to win an NCAA national championship, and to win a pro football championship. He did it as a high school coach. He did it at Ohio State, and he also did it with the Cleveland Browns, the team that's named after him still, Charlton. So when you think about Ohio State, it didn't start with Woody Hayes. He just continued on a legacy that was already there and has been picked up by Ryan Day as of late. But that Michigan program, Charlton, has always been the little brother of the Ohio State. Bo Schembechler was an assistant coach for Woody Hayes at Ohio State when he got the Michigan job.
Yep.
And his whole mantra was to always beat Ohio State at that point. And that's how that rivalry really catapulted itself. But this rivalry has been dominated 14 out of the last 15 years by Ohio State.
Yeah, and when you talk about late Paul Brown and winning national champions, even in high school, there's a Canton McKinley High School, named after him, Paul Brown Stadium. Usually the Massillon Tigers and also the Canton McKinley Bulldogs, they play that game in Ohio, oftentimes in front of 25,000 fans for a high school. So that's big-time football back there in the Midwest, Big C. So that game should be a good game because the tradition will outlast who's coaching on the sideline and who's also playing on the field. I want to get your thoughts on this big rival game that's happening in the state of Oklahoma. Number 7, Oklahoma. They're playing at number 21, Oklahoma State. We know whether it's Jalen Hurts for the Oklahoma Sooners or Chuba Hubbard for the Oklahoma State Cowboys. It's just a matter of Gundy, and I mean, he, as an older man that still wears a mullet, I think he still wears a mullet, Big Z. Oklahoma State, it seems, will always be in the backyard of Oklahoma. Even if they beat them, it's still the least respected of the two programs. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, this is a game where Oklahoma State, if they had their quarterback, would be catching Oklahoma at the right time. But they're going to be starting a true freshman quarterback, Charlton, because they lost their starter to a thumb injury. They have the nation's #1 rusher in Chuba Hubbard, and Oklahoma's defense has had trouble controlling the ball on the ground, Charlton. So Oklahoma State may have a slight advantage there. When you look at Jalen Hurts from Oklahoma, he's had a very quiet season, well, a very surprising season at Oklahoma. When you think about his total offensive numbers, Charlton, he's amassed some 4,400 yards in total offense this year on the season and has accounted for 47 touchdowns. A lot of people don't realize how good a season that he has had at Oklahoma. But his last game, Charlton, was probably his worst game of the season, where he ran for more yards than what he passed for in that game, Charlton. But he accounted for 3 touchdowns in that win over TCU. Those numbers need to be inverted. He's going to have to pass for at least 300 yards and run for another 100 yards for them to be successful against Oklahoma State in this in-state shootout.
Yeah, and even when you look at the landscape of those two programs from the Big 12 Conference, Oklahoma's had so many great coaches, and I think they had the longest unbeaten winning streak back in the day for football. I think it was 56 or 57 in a row. So even if Oklahoma State catches up to them, there's something about Oklahoma that's managed to do what Nebraska couldn't do, or even Colorado when they were all competing for that Big 12 championship, or even Texas when they were all back in the Big 8. And before that, I think it was the Southwest Conference, Big C. What is it about Norman, Oklahoma that's continued to attract enough players to stay on top, unlike Texas or Oklahoma State? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you're always the little brother sitting out there in Oklahoma. You always attract the best that you have in the state. But just like Kansas in basketball, you always find a way to get people to be siphoned your way, whether it's financially or you make other promises to them, Charlton, to come out on the plains, because in Oklahoma, you're so flat out there, you can watch your dog run away for 3 days.
Yeah, and you notice there's a lot of paper bags that blew around Oklahoma, too, Big C. The paper bags are filled with sometimes what you need to get kids to come there and play, just my opinion from what I hear. I want to go back up to the great Midwest, and at one time, these two programs were talked about in being in the Final Four, and that's number 12 Wisconsin at number 8 Minnesota. Minnesota had a hitch in their giddy-up when they fell at Iowa after they had just knocked off the mighty Penn State, and then Wisconsin had a couple of hitches in their giddy-up. They got thumped by Ohio State, but before that they had a mishap against Illinois. So it went from being talked about maybe some of the top 5 or 6 teams in the country. Now we have number 12 Wisconsin, number 8 Minnesota. But unlike Minnesota, Wisconsin has been one of the blue blood programs every single year. You can count on that program, if not winning a Big Ten championship, at least being a solid place for a bowl game. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that program up in Wisconsin got turned around a few years ago when Barry Alvarez was the coach. He is now the athletic director at Wisconsin, but he developed some winning ways with that program. When I look at Minnesota, the Flying Flicks, P.J. Flick, the coach at Minnesota, has brought in a new regime and a new mindset for this program. This could be the first time in Minnesota history, Charlton, that they win 11 regular season games if they can go off and knock off Wisconsin this week. If they knock off Wisconsin, Charlton, they have a date against Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game.
Yeah, it might be a date, but it might be one of those internet dates, Big C, where it's over and done real fast, if you understand what I'm saying. I don't think anyone's going to handle Ohio State. If they get past Michigan, and there's something about these rival games, no one's going to stop them from getting to the college football Final Four. But I also said the same thing about Oregon, so hopefully they'll win it on the field, Big C. And I think college football, they want to see Ohio State. And before I get into another big rival this week, can you tell me your reasoning? Because I'm not always a reasonable person. Sometimes I Google too much or I read too much. But how did Ohio State go from number 2 in the country to number 1 in the country when they had a win over Penn State? I understand Penn State was ranked, but LSU did nothing to lose. Had they scored 70, people would say, well, they're trying to run up the score. Well, they scored the high 60s, and people said, well, they didn't score enough. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it's amazing how the bowl committee looks at its selections, Charlton. Here's Ohio State, who struggled against Penn State, a one-loss team when they came in, and Penn State had been throttled by Minnesota, Charlton, just a few weeks prior to that. But they took Ohio State to task. Ohio State had their toughest game of the year. LSU handily handled Arkansas in the game. But LSU is also the only team in the top 4 who has beaten 4 top 10 ranked teams on the season, Charlton. And you go out and you do all you have to do to win a game, and yet you fall in the rankings. I've always said the rankings shouldn't matter, Charlton, until the last 2 weeks of the season. as we get into it, and then we get the conference championships.
Yeah.
Because it's juggling. I mean, we saw where Clemson was a month ago in the rankings, that
Yeah.
they were out of the top 4, Charlton. Now
Yeah.
they're number 3,
Yeah.
even though they haven't lost a game in 2 years.
Yep. Yep.
So who knows what the criteria is for the bowl committee? They can sit back, run the analytics on everything. I think the true analytics for any sports fan or anybody out there is the eyeball test.
Oh, yeah.
Are you going out there kicking your opponent's butt week in, week out,
Yeah.
and dominating? If you
Yeah.
are, then you should be ranked accordingly.
Well, don't poke anybody in the eyeballs. I've seen a lot of people out trying to buy Christmas presents. I saw ladies pulling, they were fighting over a doll so much they pulled a doll in half, Big C, and then nobody wanted to buy it. That's just a crazy world. You guys be nice when you're out there shopping for the same stuff. Big C, you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, around the universe on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow us on Spreaker.com. The apps that I really love are by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing, and I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. You can also follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast Television, launching on Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. I want to get into the final big game for rivalry week, Big C. A lot of turkeys will be sacrificed. I would hate to say that they're going to, I know they retired the bird down at Auburn, and they got a new one, so we wish the first one nothing but the best. Number 5, Alabama. At number 15, Auburn. If there is an upset brewing down south, this would be a bigger upset than someone else, I think, the red of Alabama losing. I don't think it's going to be an upset, though, but I think Auburn will play much better than a lot of people think they will. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I know you're no longer a freshman after you've played 11 games in college football, and Bo Nix probably had his best game of the season last week, but that was against Stanford.
Yeah.
Not Stanford, but Stanford.
Yeah.
And so now you have Alabama. Mac Jones is a much better quarterback than people want to give him credit for. Alabama has a plug-and-play system.
Yeah.
I don't see this game being within 21 points. Alabama just dominating and finding their way back into the college football playoffs, Charlton, since they're ranked number 5. We know in the SEC championship game, Charlton, one of those teams have to lose is ranked above Alabama.
Well, it depends on the betting world. You sometimes don't lose when you bet within the spread, Big C. So I'm learning about the bet world as I see things that happen on TV. I go, my friend told me about that. Tonight's NBA basketball schedule: Utah at Indiana, Brooklyn at Boston, Philadelphia's at home versus Sacramento, Orlando is at Cleveland, Detroit is at Charlotte, Toronto's home against the New York Knicks, Milwaukee's at home versus Atlanta, the LA Clippers, they're at Memphis. They put a good beat down on all the talk about Luka Doncic and how dominant he is. When he saw Paul George and Kawhi Leonard coming down, he said, man, these guys have long arms. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it's a long season in the NBA. You got to look at the overall production of Luka Doncic. It's 2-on-1, but at the end of the day, Charlton, we'll see where they are come April.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. Also, you have Miami at Houston. Should be a good game. And Miami changed their uniforms a little bit. I don't know if I like it, but it's all fair and love and war. San Antonio at home versus Minnesota. Phoenix, they're at home versus Washington. The LA Lakers, the Lake Show, go down to New Orleans. And they're going to eat a lot of that deep-fried food down in the South. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Anthony Davis makes a return back to where he said he didn't want to be any longer, Charlton.
Yep.
How well of a welcome will he get from the fans and the players?
I hope they don't boo him, but when you say, I don't want to be here, and they send you back there anyway, maybe some of those guys will forget that he said that. Portland at home versus Oklahoma City, and Chicago's in California versus the Golden State Warriors. And we know we love NBA basketball. It is fantastic. Also, there's a full slate for the NHL. Columbus at home versus Philadelphia. St. Louis at Tampa Bay. Washington at home versus Florida. Toronto's at Detroit. Boston's on the road at Ottawa in Canada. Calgary on the road at Buffalo. Carolina at the New York Rangers. Big C, the Rangers might be the only team in New York that gets a win this week. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, they most likely will, Charlton. One of the things about hockey in New York, it's always a stalwart.
It's always on ice, Big C. Pittsburgh at home versus Vancouver. Nashville will take on Vegas, and they'll be in Nashville for that one. Arizona at home versus Anaheim, Colorado versus Edmonton in Colorado, San Jose at home versus Winnipeg, and the New York Islanders across the country at the LA Kings. It's all fair in love and war. We want to wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving, and may you please travel safe and enjoy family and friends. And lots of good food, Big C. You said you're going to have some deep fried ribs or deep fried turkey, Big C. Which one was it?
We got duck on the menu, Charlton.
Fresh. It can't be fresh if it's fried, but it's all fair in love and war. Back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in this sports universe?
Well, Charlton, I'm working out of the depression I had last night. I searched and I channel surfed. And I couldn't find a damn football game on last night. I was lost.
Yeah, well, if you get lost, you can always find your way back home every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide, where you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, it's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.